Welcome back. I'm very glad that we are able to have a moment, a fireside chat. So again, we are in a virtual space, so you can imagine that there's some sort of fireplace beside me as we have a small chat with Alexandra Hebda, the Policy Officer, DG Research for the European Commission. Welcome, Alexandra. Lovely to have you here and lovely to be able to speak with you. For those of us who are project coordinators like myself and like Franca tomorrow and the other Science with and for Society projects, it's great to have you as our policy officer and sort of talk us through some of the key issues. And of course, several of those have come up today. I know you've been in and out of the meetings and you've caught different things. And I just have a first question for you, which is a more general one. Basically, what do you see as the key priorities and concerns that have emerged with the pandemic or over the past few years for science communication? Can you speak a little bit about your experience and thoughts on that?
Yes. So as you all know, and this was very well discussed during the session, it is about mitigating the spread of the fake news. And with the pandemic, some of your projects became suddenly more relevant than ever. And now we think that with the situation that is happening in Ukraine, this is even more important than before. I must say that we had a very recent staff meeting. And I must say that colleagues, for example, from the Baltic states and from some Eastern countries were really, really concerned. And they were saying that the level of fake news and propaganda is so high in some member states. And we were discussing whether we could give a kind of a booster to the results of your projects to make them even more better known. So, yeah.
So those become a bit more of the critical issues. Do you think? Well, we can talk about these projects, ours and others, but of course the European Commission has put out a number of different projects and tried to really sort of increase, and we've seen recently an emphasis on trust in science, which as Michael Arntoff mentioned this morning, instead of one project that was intended, but three that are going to focus on trust in science. Do you think that science communication more generally and projects on this, and also open science programs and processes have responded well to some of the changing pandemics, and where has that been a positive thing, and where do you think there may be needs for improvement?
Okay. So about open science, so we have a different fronts in my unit, and we are working on the different topics. So I must say that I have followed some discussion, and one speaker who was really talking about the preprints, and I have to say that I have a different stand, that I think that sharing as early as possible, and printing or publishing even before the peer review was a way of really speeding up the research. And what we have built is, for example, there's this European platform when the researchers could share all the, not only articles, but also all the epidemiological stuff, like sequence of a DNA of the virus. I'm not a biologist, so I will not go deeper, but like really everything that every research team needs. And this was shared as widely as possible. I have to say that this makes a difference. So we think that open science makes a difference. Now, how this is going on with open access and with the prices of certain publication, this is another way. I mean, another way of looking of things, and I'm not super happy to see that certain publication costs that much, and that there is no transparency about the real publication costs. So that's another thing. And what else I could say? Yes, I mean, we are also working very much about the new topic, which is a research assessment, how the research university and research funding organization, how they evaluate researchers. And this is really, really crucial. And I heard one of the speakers, Sarah, it was very interesting what she said, that there is no incentives for engaging in a science communication. And this is exactly what we think needs to change, because as long as your career will progress only on the number of articles in Science, Nature, Lancet, or whatever, we will still not get any incentives. I mean, not awarded for doing what your project have done so brilliantly.
I think what we're finding is that this is quite a controversial discussion because, of course, trying to find out how to do this appropriately. I know in the Netherlands we have a whole system that's attempting to develop what we call recognition and rewards. The Dutch adage, the sort of phrase is, we don't have to have all five-legged sheep is the phrase in the Netherlands. Again, of researchers or of academics, of people that can do absolutely everything, and sort of shifting this model to the way in which we may engage in promotions and see a more effective distribution of people and encourage them to do more science communication. Is the way to go, but it has its own challenges, because some of those assessments are a bit softer than, have you reached the highest level in a peer-reviewed journal, and do you actually meet the criteria that may be put?
Yes, it is very difficult. I mean, my boss, Michael Arendoft, done the introduction today. It is true that it is very difficult. It is a process that we tried to do for years. I must say that this was with the previous commission, with the Commissioner Moedas, when he absolutely wanted to have this kind of policy platform identifying how to move forward. And what they have done for years, they have only identified bottlenecks, and they were only identifying a problem that it will be extremely difficult to move forward and to have a general criteria for everyone, because there's such a big difference between historian and between microbiologists. They will not need the same skills. They will not do the research in the same way. So it is true that it is very, very difficult. But what we think that we should go more into the ecosystems and each research discipline doing their own rules and moving forward in their own pace.
Yeah, and I think that may be a much more helpful way of doing that, but of course it has its challenges, because increasingly what we see is so much more multidisciplinary approaches. So we see these processes. So we may sort of suggest that we begin to think about how to do this more effectively per discipline or a group of people, but then we add to this a bit of a challenge, because to tackle problems, to tackle the issues, and to tackle things like misinformation, we may need to approach it from different perspectives. But I'm curious whether you think that, again, I want to just go through the responses of science communication. And we just had a whole discussion about the challenges on social media. We talked a little bit about audiences and journalism earlier. What do you think the response of the public has been to new approaches to science communication? How positive have they been? How receptive have they been? And is this something that a trend that we are hoping for a positive outcome, or is it something that becomes worrying and concerning? Maybe let's start with the public, and then I'd like to go into ask that question, more specific about government and policy agencies like the European Commission, and then maybe to higher education and research. So
what I think about the public, so it's less about my feeling, but for example, we had this very big Eurobarometer survey. And this is huge. And I have to tell you that we've been working for more than 1 year about this. So, and it is a very solid methodology, and it was face-to-face interview. It was delayed due to the pandemic because we couldn't get this face-to-face. It was done in their own member states, also Norway, Turkey, candidate countries. So at the end, the survey was really huge. And what we really seen in a good scientific methodology, that people are very receptive towards science, and they expect to be more engaged and to be better informed. So I can share the link to this Eurobarometer survey on science and technology with you. You have plenty of good scholars and good researchers, so I'm sure you would like to see the results. And what was the second part of the question?
So we move beyond the public, of course, which again, we see a bit of a positive trend there. This is a question I also asked Deborah Blum, who said, yeah, actually it becomes interesting because we do see a more engaged public in science, at least trying to understand that a bit. But then again, how has this changed in the European Commission? Of course, the pandemic immediately brought up all sorts of new approaches. You've already mentioned a couple of issues and quite recent ones, the concerns over what's happening in Ukraine and our Baltic states' responses to some issues of misinformation. How do you feel that the response of the Commission has been in terms of engaging?
I must say that it has shifted dramatically. So I've seen for the very first time Commission reacting really quickly and really, I must say, radically, because what happened is that before they, to mitigating the spread of the fake news, there was one website to go and check, but what are the real chances that misinformed citizen will go and really check this fact on another web page? But I don't know if you follow what happened in Brussels. Basically, the two TVs, Russia Today and Sputnik, was completely banned from the European Commission press services, and following this, it was also banned from the European Parliament building as well. Sorry,
Yeah. So what we've seen is that we've seen a much more responsive Commission, and I think actually what becomes interesting is that has been embedded, I think, a little bit in the mentality of how do we respond to the pandemic, and then we see this rather significant increase in misinformation, or at least the way in which it's been presented, and a more immediate response more broadly in the public. I'm going to go to a different question, which was raised earlier, and I think this becomes interesting in the way in which you talk about open science. And one of our panelists talked briefly about the potential for misuse or misinterpretation of openly accessible information of science that's been communicated. And I'm curious if that's a concern of yours. Again, we may see that we may open more academic research to the public and make that more broadly available. But that also has the potential that some people may choose to purposely take bits and pieces and actually not to do a clear and coherent and comprehensive job, which of course scientists are trained to do. And I'm wondering if this is a concern that you may have as we do push for more open access.
Yeah. I mean, all the elements are interlinked, because you see, because of this culture, publish or perish. Researchers were really hurrying to publish as many pieces as possible. And it's true that during the pandemic, you've seen some papers that were just not very relevant or not really well thought through. And this again comes back to what Michael Arendt said in the morning. Another element of all this is a solid methodology and reproducibility. So if researchers are not so much pushed to just produce a number of publications, and the accent is somewhere else, it's on the solid methodology of good research questions, then it will be less hassle if it will be less problem that the preprints are shared, because you will trust that if they are coming to the publication, this is already well thought through, and this is robust, and this is a good research, good quality. Because what we need to remember, which is very simple, but that here in Europe, we have very little private funding in research, and most of the research is funded from the public money. So you see, it's just spending money better if the research is done in a more solid way.
Yeah, I would fully agree. I think that's actually crucial that we share, especially we need to respond appropriately to those that are funding the research itself and actually engage with them. Do you think that some of this message, again, we connect with the European Commission, we talk about the public, to what degree are research institutes or research organizations, whether those are higher education, universities, or research institutes themselves, are getting some of this message about how to connect with and create more public value for the work that they are doing? Is that happening, or are we still concerned and see other ways in which we might incentivize that?
I don't know. I hope they do. So just to tell you that this process that I described about reforming the way how the research is assessed is a process that for the very first time we are conducting in this very open way. So because we are preaching so much about openness, we try to do it our own, in our own unit. So I can also share after the link, and this process is still open, and we have already 300 different universities and organizations, some very big, some smaller, some individual universities that would like to work with us, mostly via webinar but be in this process. And it's true that the Dutch are very much front runners. Congratulations. And the examples that we see, I think the strategy was called like Rooms for Everyone's Talent, is a very good and very inspiring.
Yeah, great, and I'm glad that the Dutch can help be a forerunner. But of course, we're supportive of all of our European counterparts as we figure this out together. This is close to the end. I'm wondering if there's any last-minute things that you want to share, and that maybe that we missed or we overlooked, or my questions didn't quite address.
Maybe one more thing that I'm a huge fan of is Diamond Open Access Publishing. And this is a new emerging topic. And I guess we will be working on this next year. Basically, it is about building a publishing platforms on the maybe open source tools, and just allowing disciplines and different societies to publish in this way that it is for free for researchers and it is for free for the audience. So sharing the knowledge, but of course caring about high quality.
Yeah, and maybe I do ask one brief comment there, because of course we saw last week, I mentioned it to you separately, that the journal Nature had an article, sort of an op-ed piece about the concerns about open access and its potential for increasing disparities or not sort of offering. Do you see incentives there for this Diamond Open Access? Is this also something that will be based on or prorated based on the funding that, again, to publish an open access article costs quite a bit of money at this moment, and certain organizations have advantages over others, and that discrepancy, that disparity becomes problematic. I'm curious if you see ways of overcoming that as a final point.
I mean, if you publish in a Diamond Open Access, there are no costs, or the funders takes over the cost, and the costs are very transparent, like we have already, but this is only for the projects that we are funding. We have this Open Research Europe publishing platform that will be also developed. There are some talks right now how to make it more sustainable and how to make it like a really big project. So that's the way, you see. So you see that really putting a PDF on the website, come on, doesn't cost a price of the car. I mean, every person that has a common sense sees that. So I think the way will be like really to go to the new digital tools, but it's true that it will not happen from one day to the other, and we will still need more time to change the culture. And it's again interlinked with the way how you evaluate your career. So if we abandon impact factor points, and then you do a fantastic project with a societal engagement, with a very good communication, then your career will be going because you've done a very good points.
Yeah, so again, inherently interconnected and intricately complex, of course, but also something that we're trying to solve on a regular basis. And there we go. We add the family element. That's lovely. It's also one of these wonderful things when we do these online and hybrid moments. We begin to see the human people behind these practices, and I think that's crucial. Alexandra, I thank you for your time and energy and focus on promoting our projects and looking at the policy, and of course for your comments today.
The pleasure was mine.
Yeah, and so we transition into a last bit. It's nice to transition right back into myself. And I want to end today with a few quick comments and highlights that, of course, I noticed as the coordinator of the TRESCA project, and I look forward to tomorrow. And the first thing I wanted to note that came up several times is this connection with our audiences. One of the things I find most fascinating is that this needs to be relational. It's not something at a distance, this sort of process in which we separate ourselves, whether as scientists, whether as journalists, whether as policymakers, whether those are citizens who are simply interested in critical issues and the scientific facts behind them. And for me, as a researcher, I'm always curious, where do those people connect? One of the most interesting things for me during this project process with TRESCA was when our video with the Kurzgesagt came out that looked at, again, the way in which we have to tell short lies, at least Kurzgesagt had to do that to communicate effectively. I often tell my students when I talk about how they're feeling about the world, and right now it's a bit of a concerning place with the news that we have at the moment, but sometimes you feel good about things. And I say, if you really feel good about the world, maybe you should look at YouTube comments, because they will remind you how terrible human beings are and how awful the world can be. And I usually say that as a joke. But as I say that, I took a look at the comments on the Kurzgesagt video. And when you read through that, you begin to see the ways in which certain moments actually affect people. And I think that was a really profound thing. The emotional people who responded to that video, and the way in which, in that particular case, they were transparent and honest about what they were doing. And I think the point that I hear, or at least have heard today, is how and when we engage with our audiences. And those models for engagement and connected to a sense of who we are and what we are doing, whether that's as science communicators, whether that's as journalists, whether that's as policymakers or people who are just interested in science communication more generally. And so that connection with the audience is something that I will take away from this meeting, but also from the way in which we have done our research. A second point that I think was really interesting is the necessity for us to draw on our history. And this was something that Deborah Blum made clear, is that not everything is new, not everything is this a big change, but actually we know a number of different things. And I think one of the key points for me is understanding where that history has come from, and to make use of the tools that we have that are sometimes similar to what we had before, but sometimes are quite different. And those, of course, of digital or social media are incredibly clear. Using the memification of science, as one of our panelists also mentioned, I think that was an incredibly adept moment. It's not the final answer, but like the notion that I mentioned earlier of the connection with the audience, that is about getting people engaged longer term so that we begin to see a clear trajectory in the future to engaging people in science. And that also connects with Deborah Blum's mention of keeping the smart stuff and not being worried about repeating it. And finally, I think one of the more interesting things that came up again is this notion of this honesty and transparency. One of the things that I, as a researcher, and actually, responding to Alexandra, as we all had to change and shift in these projects and the way in which we were oriented, that people were seeing science taking place in real time. Most people wanted some sort of assurance. They wanted to know that things were true or real. And of course, science plays out as a process, and science does change. And I think the point is that we need to be able to understand and respond effectively to this assurance that citizens, public, tends to desire, with honesty and transparency about here's what we know now and an awareness that these things can change. And so for me as a coordinator and as the host for this day, these are three things that came out pretty strongly as I thought through and listened to our panelists and our keynotes and had this chat with Alexandra as well. So that ends a day of looking backwards, but I do want to remind you that we are looking forward. We are looking very much forward to tomorrow. Tomorrow the Rethink partners will be presenting a bit more on stage, and Frank Kapper, the coordinator of the Rethink project, will take my place in this role. Beginning with a keynote on rethinking public trust. And we'll talk about how do we deal with the complexities of science communication. And of course, we will be looking at the future of public trust in terms of policy and how do we engage with that. But I want to offer one final invitation, again, as a final moment to remind you to participate, to share, to promote, to give us feedback on our massive online open course, Communicating Trustworthy Information in the Digital World. This is available on Coursera, and of course we've posted it several places on our social media feeds, and you are welcome to experience a little bit of how we have put these pieces together, and hopefully it will be an instrument, a tool that will increase our trust and our conversations for communicating about science and its effects on our society. So for now, I wish you a fine rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning at the second part of our conference. Thank you.